We want to move to reporting now from NBC News. 2 weeks ago, NBC's Julia Ainsley and Jacob Soboroff broke a story about the conditions at a U.S. Border Patrol station in Yuma, Arizona. They obtained more than 24 significant incident reports written by government caseworkers based on what children had described to them being held there. The report included an allegation of sexual assault and retaliation against kids who asked for clean water and food. Julia sat down in an exclusive interview with a Guatemalan boy who was held at the Yuma border facility for 11 days. 17-year-old Abner describes in detail what he went through, including being held in a cell that was so crowded he was forced to sleep standing up, not knowing what time of the day it was, because the lights were always on, and not being able to properly drink water.
Cuando nos tocaba que tomar agua en los chorros, pues, no nos daban con qué recibirnos, que con las manos, así todas sucias, y como no nos daban ni siquiera un vasito, ni en algo recibir. Nosotros a veces aunque sea nos lavamos algo las manos porque no teníamos ni con qué lavarnos, ni algún jabón ni nada. Así agarrábamos el agua y lo tomábamos porque no teníamos con qué recibirlo.
And Julia joins us now with more on her new reporting on those conditions inside the Yuma station. Julia, incredible that this continues.
It was, and it was incredible that Abner took the time and had the courage to sit down with us. It is so rare, Mika, to get immigrants to talk to us, especially because they have a fear of being targeted for deportation, and let alone a child. That took an enormous amount of bravery on his part to sit down with us. And of course, that is why we're not showing his face or sharing his last name. But I think what he got into, especially when he talks about his treatment by the guards, shows more than the government has been willing to admit when it comes to the retaliation. He talked about asking what time it was because, of course, he didn't know when the lights were always on, and he was mocked. They said, why, do you have a meeting to get to? He talked about guards yelling at him and other boys if they got too close to the windows, and, of course, being denied food if he needed more. We talked to him about what the soap, the bathing conditions, but he kept going back to food, which is an even more basic human need.
Yo a veces quería comer. Yo quería comer, pero les pedía y ellos no nos daban. Y solo a veces 2 veces nada más nos daban como a las 10 y como a las 5 por ahí. De ahí ya no nos daban nada. Y a mí me daba hambre en las noches y no nos daban y les pedíamos, pero ellos no hacían por darnos. Y había muchos niños pequeños que lloraban por salir. Querían salir ellos también, pero como nadie nos sacaba, no nos sacaban ni siquiera un minuto afuera y nada, y de ahí muchos niños pequeños sí lloraban ahí porque querían salir, y de ahí a veces no nos daban a todos comida, solo a algunos, y entonces a veces unos les daban a veces 2 hamburguesas o algo así, y entonces a veces le dábamos uno a los pequeños, porque los pequeños eran los que querían comer más que uno.
So, Mika, that perfectly shows you how these older children, the 16, 17-year-olds, had to care for what they called the little ones, the pequeños, because they didn't have the food. He thought that he could stand the hunger. He could stand standing up. He had to stand up for his first 48 hours trying to sleep because they were so concerned about these little children, because the guards weren't taking care of them. And he said when they would cry out, the guards would get more angry. And so the people in his cell had to band together to take care of the little children. Now, I will say that we reached out to DHS and Customs and Border Protection about these allegations. They say they're reviewing it, and any allegations of misconduct would be referred to the Office of Professional Responsibility, but that they don't believe that the time that Abner was there, these 11 days from late May to early June, that the conditions were as he described it. But you can see in perfect detail how he describes them.
Customs and Border Protection released a statement in part saying the claims are inconsistent with Customs and Border Protection's records, corresponding to the juvenile migrant's time in custody from May 25th to June 5th, 2019. It is important to note that Customs and Border Protection takes all reports of employee misconduct seriously, and the juvenile's allegations of mistreatment have been referred to Customs and Border Protection's Office of Professional Responsibility. And Joe, I mean, doesn't seem like, I think the word, this seems like a condition that is different than mistreatment. It sounds like a large group of people are being put in a situation where they are being tortured.
Well,
if they can't sleep and they have to stand up for days, that reminds me of something.
Right. Unfortunately, this is all too consistent with what we've heard along the border for some time, thanks to reporters like Julia Ainsley. And Julia, by the way, thank you so much for being with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
You have agents, of course, Mika, that have been caught having Facebook pages, mocking and ridiculing those that they're taking care of, actually printing coins, mocking and ridiculing these children who are being abused. And Karine, I remember back 2005, 2006, when stories broke about how the United States and our allies were treating terrorists, suspected terrorists that we captured. And you would read stories about how they would make them stand up sleeping. They would keep lights on 24 hours a
and
day.
there was debate.
To disorient them, have them live in squalid conditions, crowded conditions, to break them mentally so they would sit down and start talking to our interrogators. We are now doing that to 5, 6, 7-year-old children, 10-year-old children who, let me say again, for the ignorant, are coming here, many of them with their parents legally, to seek refugee status. That is not illegal. That is a legal action. And for taking that legal action, Karine, it sounds a lot like they are suspected terrorists being interrogated at Gitmo.
That's exactly right, Joe. It's just what Mika said. It's torture. We're torturing these 5, 6-year-old, these babies. And just one other story, just one more story of the inhumane kind of nature and treatment by this administration. You know what this reminds me of, too, just listening to you talking, Joe? It reminds me of Oscar and his 23-month-old young daughter, Valeria, who we saw face down in the water, crossing the Rio Grande, because the story is they were denied. They were trying to seek asylum and were denied at the border, and they took extreme circumstances to try to get here for a better life. And this is how we're treating people, kids, children. And so here's the thing, Joe. I think that Democrats should not be doing deals with Donald Trump and this administration. They should be using this. They should be trying to figure out, how do they fix this? How do they stop this? We can't keep seeing this type of torturous type of behavior and treatment, and also just more deaths. So they need to stand up, because Republicans in Congress are just not going to do it.
Well, and I agree with you. I know that we may differ on many issues, Karine, but I agree with you. You don't make a deal. You do not make a deal with Donald Trump unless you ensure that in that deal there are the mechanisms needed to protect the children, to protect the toddlers, to protect the teenagers, to protect the young people at the border who, again, are facing some of the same conditions, according to Julia's interview and the other things we've heard, Mika, from the border, that, again, our interrogators were doing to suspected terror suspects. And listen, I say this again, I have to say this because Donald Trump lies so often that I know a lot of people get confused because he lies repeatedly, and Republicans that are Trumpists lie repeatedly about this. But when you come to the United States of America and you are seeking asylum, that is a legal action. You are protected under American laws, and you are not to be treated this way. Even though I am for tough border enforcement, this is inhumane, this is obscene, and this is not what America is about. You don't believe me? Go listen to Ronald Reagan's farewell address to America, Republicans. Do it today. Listen to Ronald Reagan's farewell address to America.
We need more transparency. We need to see what's happening there. The whole thing is backwards. Up next, we're just moments away from learning who will be the United Kingdom's next Prime Minister. Britain's ambassador to the United Nations joins the table next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.